Welcome to this week's Speaker's Tip. Today I want to talk about using transitions in your speeches. And in all the coaching I do and watching people's speeches, looking at what works, what doesn't work, transitioning from one scene or one story, one component in your speech to another one is a critical technique to actually make sure the speech works. The big thing with the transition, you have to make sure you take the audience with you. And there's a lot of times I see people will do a transition, they'll be in one scene, they'll take the audience to another scene or start talking about another scene, and they won't make it clear that they've switched scenes, or they go into a scene that creates confusion. Now, I talk about this when you start your speech, or you start the first act in the story is the setup, and you don't want to create confusion. And confusion happens when people don't know what's going on. So there's three components that I look at in a transition that I feel need to be there. And it's when was it, where was it, who was there? Pretty simple. What's going on? You're transitioning from one to the other. There's four areas that I've seen people typically make mistakes with their transitions. The one is they will give way too much information. Let's just say they're talking about when they were a kid and they were at the beach, and then they were 25 years old and they were going skiing, that story. So they're talking about being at the beach. And then they said, I was living in Philadelphia when I was 25, and I had three friends that decided that they wanted to go up into the Catskill Mountains and going skiing. And I'd never been skiing before, but I thought it would be interesting to go skiing with them. I didn't know the people that well, but anyway, so I packed my clothes up and they picked me up in a car and we drove up to no, you just need to go. I was 25 years old. I was skiing in the Catskills. The other thing is they don't give enough information. They'll be talking about being 7 years old on the beach, and then they'll say, then when I was skiing in the Catskills, and they have no idea when it was, where it was, who was there, what's going on. They just switch over to I was skiing in the Catskills. Now in their mind, this is what I've seen, in their mind, they have all that information and they're just giving you the highlights of it. That's why it's so important we listen to our speeches so we know what the audience is hearing and we get out of our head with it. The other problem that I've seen with transitions is they don't have one. There's just no transition there whatsoever to move it over. So I want to give you a couple examples of what I consider to be good transitions. They're very simple. The big thing, like I said, the important thing here is that you take the audience with you. You let them know you're transitioning. And to me, the shorter the better, but hey, I'm moving now. I was talking about this. Now we're going to be talking about this. Here's where I was with it. Now I've got some examples for you. Unfortunately, I'm not going to show you any bad examples. And the reason is I don't want to use anybody I know in all the videos I have of a bad example of a transition, because I don't have that person's response or permission to go, this is a bad example of a transition. But I'm going to show you a couple good examples. So let's jump in here on the screen share and see what we have here. Okay, the first person I'm going to use is, we got Randy Harvey in his 2004 World Champion of Public Speaking. In his speech, I got two examples with Randy. He's talking about his father here, and then he's going to transition. So let's just watch this.
Fat Dad was my daddy, and that loving nickname Fat Dad has been handed down through 4 generations to the men in my family. When I was 16, Fat Dad bought me a 1963 Volkswagen Beetle. Why?
Okay, very simple transition there. He's talking about Fat Dad. The name's been handed down. Now he's transitioning to the next story. He was 16. Who bought it? Fat Dad did. What was it? It was a 64 Volkswagen Beetle. Very smooth transition. You knew when it was, you know what was going on, you know what the story was about. And now we're going to look at that story a little later. Randy does another transition. And what's happened is he wrecked the car. Okay, so now he's going to do another transition about how his fat dad, his father, helped him. So let's watch this.
I'll buy another fountain. We can even replace that old car. Those are just things. But I could never replace you. Besides, the town will be talking about this for weeks. The lesson? Love. Now, teenage boys, they don't always think about cars. Sometimes they think about girls.
Okay, very smooth transition right there. He had the accident. The town's going to be talking about this forever. He learns a lesson about love, and then he transitions over to teenage boys, cars, and they also think about girls. Now he's going to start talking about girls with that. Okay, the next one I want to show you here is what I think is a very smooth transition by, hold on, I've got a situation on my screen where my Zoom keeps popping down across my, there we go, I can get it right there. There we go. With Mark Hunter, does a very nice transition here and actually answers a question everybody's got in their mind. So let's watch this, we'll talk about it.
Yeah. I too, like all of us, have dreamed impossible dreams. But to make one of my dreams even remotely reachable, I needed to learn a lesson, perhaps a lesson for us all. At the age of 22, an accident completely changed my view of the world. Before the accident, I saw the world from the height of an invincible 6 feet. Now I see it from the height of a consummate navel gazer.
Okay, so he's talking about dreaming impossible dreams. Of course, the question that's going to be on everybody's mind in the audience, the elephant on the stage, is why are you in a wheelchair? What happened? That should be addressed at some point, just so that people don't have their attention on it. But Mark does a beautiful job of explaining what happened. He was 25, there was an accident, and put him in the wheelchair. He doesn't have to go into the details of the accident. He doesn't have to go, I was driving down a road, a rainy road late one night in Queensland, Australia, and a lorry came on, without brakes. He doesn't have to go into, I don't know what the accident was. I'm just saying he doesn't have to go into all that detail. He also could have said, at the age of 25, I started sitting down in the world or something. I went from standing to sitting, and that's too short of a transition. It doesn't answer the question for the audience, but it was a very nice, clean transition that said his life changed, an accident, he's 25 years old, been in a wheelchair. You've got it. Now, the last person I want to share with you, and this is going to be a little longer video than I normally do. There's one person that I consider to be an absolute master storyteller, and I've listened to for years, and I've seen him live, and it's Garrison Keillor. If you're not familiar with Garrison Keillor, as soon as I said that, some people are going to go, oh, I love Garrison Keillor. Other people are going to go, who is that? Garrison Keillor ran a show on National Public Radio here in the US for years, and he told these stories about this mythical town in Minnesota called Lake Wobegon. And you talk about a guy a storyteller who can take you on a journey and take you anywhere he wants to take you, and transition left and right, and to have the story loop around and give you details of sub-stories or within stories. Just a phenomenal experience. So I have about a 3-minute clip I want to show you of Garrison Keillor walking through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I got 6 transitions in 3 minutes, moving the story along. But at no point do you ever feel you don't know where he's going. You're not with him. You're not tracking him. You are tracking with him completely the entire time as an audience, which makes him such a delight to listen to. So let's listen to Garrison for a second, and then we'll analyze very quickly what he did. So here's Garrison Keillor telling a story. He's in New York City. He's talking to an audience about his mythical town in Lake Wobegon.
So it's been a quiet week in Lake Wobegon, Minnesota, my hometown. Been a quiet week, and people are getting ready for Christmas, of course. It's been cold, colder than here in New York. We wouldn't know what to do with this warm weather because it's cold is a stimulant, and cold is what stimulates the festivity of Christmas. You light a fire in the fireplace, you light candles, and you gather close to other people. And if you're lucky, you married somebody who gives off heat. When we say she's hot, that's what we mean. She's She gives off heat, and that, and making you laugh. That's the beginning of a good marriage. You eat your lamb stew, and you eat your beans, and that creates heat, and you gather together, and you feel good at this time of year. It's a beautiful time. The Catholic Church and the Lutheran Church have their manger scenes up. The Lutheran Church has a smaller manger scene because they're Lutherans, they don't want to show off, and so theirs is modest. And the Catholics, Christine, the Catholics, they have a lot of saints, to add in, and they for a week before Christmas they have live animals there around the creche, and which is kind of a dispute in the Catholic Church. Father Wilmer is opposed to having animals. It's just a lot of trouble, and he thinks it distracts people from the message of the Nativity. But Sister Arvon lobbies for the animals. Cows are no problem. You put the hay down and they're fine. Sheep can be a problem. Sheep can jump higher than you would guess, and sometimes sheep get skittish, and goats are even worse. We haven't used goats in many years, but the sheep, there was a sheep 2 years ago who wound up in the manger, which is not a part of Scripture, and started kicking the manger apart. Luckily, the Christ child had not arrived yet, but so Father Wilmer thinks it's all a big problem, but Sister Arvon loves it because young people love it. And whatever you can do to get young people to take their eyes off their telephones and to look at the real world around them, she believes in that. She substituted llama.
Okay, so I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. Starts off talking about it's a quiet week on Lake Wobegon, which is how he starts all of his stories off about Lake Wobegon. But he goes immediately to New York and the weather. And he starts talking about Christmas and how cold stimulates Christmas. So we're moving from that. And then he starts talking about, he takes the cold and the heat into a marriage component, that's what makes a good marriage. He talks about marriage and being together and everything about marriage, and then into the difference between the Catholic and the Lutheran Church. And starts talking about the differences between the churches and why the Lutherans are more modest than the Catholics because they have more saints and everything. And the manger scenes, and what happens with the manger scenes, the animals in the manger scenes, the controversy between the father and the sister. And then he takes it into taking youth and getting their eyes off of their cell phones and getting them to look at the real world. And he did all that in 3 minutes. And if you watch the transitions, at no point were you lost. You were tracking with him the whole time. And as I said, I've watched Garrison Keillor for years, and people will ask me, who is somebody who influenced you? I saw what you could do with speaking, listening to Garrison Keillor, because I usually listen to him on the radio. And I had the visions of his stories going with me as I drove down the road in my car. This subject of transitions is something we could spend hours on. And I just want to bring it up to you that you need to watch the transitions in your speech and make sure you clearly transition from one scene to the other. Don't put too much information in it, but give the audience a clear understanding of when it is, where it is, who's there. It's like starting another little mini story in your speech when you transition. Let them know where you are, what's taking place, so you take the audience with you. That's it for this week. I'll see you next week.